Hello, this is Vicki Jervickus of the Greater Gainesville Chamber, and I'm the Director of Public Policy. I'm delighted today to welcome Gary Gordon to our candidate interview series. Gary is a candidate for Gainesville City Mayor. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself, and then I've got some questions for him, and then he'll summarize it all and wrap it up for us. So
if you see me glance down to my right, I'm looking at the clock.
So okay. All right. Well, I will try to keep you on track. The beauty of this format is we don't do very strict. I do not have a timer or anything.
Okay.
But okay. I will make sure that you stay within our time limit so I don't have to cut you off at the end.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Well, my name is Gary Gordon, and I grew up here in Gainesville, graduated from PK Young in 1970. I went off to college at Emory University and then Northwestern University in Evanston. So I lived in Atlanta, and then I lived in Evanston for 1 year, and then I lived in Chicago for my senior year. I moved back to Atlanta for a year and then came back to Gainesville and spent a lot of time here. And it was during that time that I became active in a variety of issues. And that activity led me to running for the city commission in 1982. I didn't quite make it. So I ran again in 1983 and won, and I served from 1983 to 86. Serving as mayor commissioner, that was the way it was back then, from 1985 to 1986. After I left office, did a little bit more things here, and then moved out to Southern California, lived in Venice, and then we got a condo in Culver City. Primarily out there, I spent 19 years working as the executive director of the Main Street Business Improvement Association in Santa Monica, California. And I think that those 19 years on top of what I had previously done here are particularly relevant in talking with the folks in the Greater Gainesville Chamber, because that job, which I'll go into detail at some point if you want, had me working with, I was hired because of what I'd done here, had me working with city officials, elected, top staff, subordinates, neighborhood activists, community movers and shakers. My office was in the Chamber of Commerce, and of course working for the 400 business license holders of the Merchant Association. I came back here after that period, and my wife and I really wasn't going to get involved in local politics. And then I saw what they were doing, and one thing led to another. I'll go into detail about that if you want. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I decided to run because I could not picture myself going into the voting booth and voting for Ed Bilarski or David Ariola or Harvey Ward. I couldn't see myself doing it. I don't like what Ward and Ariola have been doing on the city commission. And Ed, you know, he may be a nice guy. He may or may not have done a good job at GRU, but he's got no experience in most of the things that he's talking about. He's got positions, but he doesn't have experience. I'm the one that's got the experience. I think I'm the best qualified candidate.
Okay, very good. Well, let's get into a little bit more detail about that. Mm-hmm. What do you perceive are the three most important concerns facing Gainesville right now?
Well, I go back to the basics. City governments deal with police, fire, public works, recreation and parks. We own our utilities. And then there are certain other additional amenities, shall we say. The utility situation, we're in a real fix because of that debt. So that's something that's got to be dealt with. Oh, I think I left out land use planning and zoning. That's the other main thing, because cities decide who gets to use the land for what. And there's a tremendous amount of activity in that arena. So the utilities mess, the land use and planning issues that are coming up and already before the current commission and will continue to come up. And then the general government, management of the general government. The turnover in staff that's occurred makes things difficult. for the rest of the staff and for the citizens, and I think for the commission. And then just the situation with the general government budget, even if you exclude the utility portion of it, that external audit report reveals that they haven't been keeping track of the money for 3 years. And I asked the acting city manager about that, the interim city manager. I said, didn't they know? And she said they were getting memos every month. So somebody's been asleep at the switch. Too many people, perhaps. They fired the auditor. You need an auditor to stay on top of this kind of thing. So, reducing it to 3, the utility situation, land use planning and zoning, and budget. And then within budget, I would add public safety, because funding for public safety is part of straightening out the mess with the city budget.
Okay, very good. It's kind of a good segue to the next question, which is, what would you say is the role of the mayor of Gainesville?
The role of the mayor of Gainesville is really simple. You run the meeting, and if you're invited, you cut the ribbons. It's this notion that I don't like the idea that the mayor is now directly elected. Didn't used to be that way when I previously served. If elected, I will try and move forward to reversing that situation, if you will. I've already said, if elected, I'll ask for an ordinance that would reduce the mayor's pay down to what the rest of the commissioners earn, because there's no reason to pay somebody $10,000 extra a year to run meetings. We didn't do it back then. We don't need to do it now. So the mayor being directly elected kind of exalts the position. It elevates the position. And this is a city that doesn't need that exalted elevation. And it can go to the person's head, where they become imperial. I'm the mayor. And that's not me. I want to be the one that works with everybody, runs the meetings. I'm very good at running meetings. I know that from my history here and out in California. So run the meetings and involve people in the discussion. I think one thing the mayor can do is set the tone. And right now we've got a tone of acrimony at city commission meetings. And I think it traces back to the nature of some of the people on the commission and to the current mayor. When people are angry and frustrated, they need to be heard, not told, shut up. And when we did things back in the day, we didn't even run a clock on people when they spoke. It was very collegial. We often asked questions as people came up and they said something, and we said, okay, but then what would you do about this? And they would volunteer and answer. It was very collegial, and we got a lot done. And we involved people. I mean, that was the thing. We made an investment in the people who had invested in us.
Okay, very good. Third question would be, what would be your top priorities and projects if you become mayor?
Well, if this land use and change that they're working on passing now passes, which would eliminate single family zoning, if there is an avenue to reverse that, one of my top priorities would be reversing it. Another top priority would be to do what I used to do, which is dig into the budgets, literally roll up sleeves, dig in, and see where we're spending too much money, like on consultants. We never used to hire consultants. The only consultants we used to hire were bond consultants for the utilities. We invested in citizen advisory committees, people from the university, people from the business community, and so on, to give us the advice we needed. And we were able to move forward, get a lot of good things done. The amount of money spent on consultants now, and not just this city. I mean, obviously, consultants all over the country are making money hand over fist, telling cities that they've never even been to what they ought to do. That's not a good way to do it. So digging into the budget, trying to increase spending for public safety. There are some needs in the recreation and parks area. especially after school youth activities. But again, a lot of this stuff hinges on the budget, and that involves really investigation. And it also involves having the votes of the majority of the commission to go for it.
Okay, very good. You touched a little bit on this, and this will give you an opportunity to say a little more about it. There has been significant turmoil both within the commission and within city staff. How do you think this is best addressed?
Well, first of all, a certain amount of turnover is always going to happen. When I served here, we fired the city manager in my second year. We replaced the attorney in my third year. And there were reasons for that. And the public understood what we were doing, and we talked about it, and there were unanimous votes and so on. It was all done with transparency, all done publicly. When I worked in Santa Monica, I went through in 19 years, 5 city managers, 3 or 4 police chiefs, 3 or 4 planning directors, a lot of subordinate staff. And of course, even the merchant community that I worked for turned over as people went out of business, other people opened a business, and so on. So turnover in and of itself, it's what occurs and why it's occurring, and whether anybody's really steering the ship. I think the past 2 city managers have been a disaster. This interim city manager seems to be pretty good. I don't know if they're going to hire her permanently before, if elected, I come on board. But I would really give her a close look. I've had a really good conversation with her, and I've watched her in action. She seems very dedicated, first of all, to sorting out the mess with the budget. And when we brought in a city manager, I was the lead person on that. I went out to Bakersfield, and we hired the guy who had been the finance director in Bakersfield, because I knew we needed somebody in that role who had a finance background. And he, W.D. Higginbotham, he turned out to be a very good manager. So that kind of turnover, it depends what's causing it. If there's morale problems, you got to go to the root of the morale problem and see who's causing it. Now, I will say this: the city commission is limited to dealing only with the charter officers. A city commissioner or mayor cannot tell a police chief what to do, or a planning director. And I abide by that. I always did, and I would if elected. It's a very clear chain of command. If the police chief were doing something that the community didn't like and we didn't like, we would tell the manager. And if the manager didn't do something about it, we would replace the manager. You know, not the police chief, because we can't fire the police chief. We make policy. Say we as if I'd already been elected, I'm sorry. The commission makes policy, and the charter officers see to their departments to carry it out. I think a lot of the turmoil has caused some morale problems. And so that needs to be addressed in terms of trying to secure people who will not use Gainesville as a stepping stone. I saw this out in Santa Monica, as a stepping stone to the next job up the ladder or to retirement, but instead to somebody who will come in for 5 years or more and really make their investment in the community, because we've made an investment in them.
Very good. All right. And then the final question I have for you is, why should the members of the business community vote for you?
Well, I managed a small business here in town, Hide and Zeke Records. Some people remember this fondly. Other people have no memory of it at all. That's okay. It lasted for quite a while.
I remember.
And then Charlie Scales, unfortunately, had a heart attack and passed away, and ultimately closed. But I was part of the early crew on that store from 1980 to 85 as the manager. That gave me a lot of insight into retail business and managing people, and working with customers who are always right. Now that if that were it alone, I would say, okay, that's kind of slim. It's not really enough. Also, working as I did here, with a variety of people in the business community, and sometimes we disagreed, and that's fair. But I heard everybody out, and we, we had, like I said, we had the kind of meetings where we'd really listen to people and talk with people. I think we did a lot with Ken. I was part of that commission that approved the original downtown redevelopment with the ATRAB grant. ATRAB? That may not be the right initials. There was an initial associated with that from the federal government. It wasn't Housing and Urban Development. Anyway, I can't remember what it was. And anyway, we got a grant. We did some land swap, and I think we improved the downtown in a direction that we wanted to. The thing I think that really justifies my running in this day and age even more than my previous record is the 19 years that I spent as the executive director of that merchant association, because that job required me to work on behalf of that business community on Main Street. It was about a mile-long street, 400 business license holders, 200 of whom were retail and restaurants. The others were second-story businesses, a variety of services. And that was daily. That was hearing what they needed at our weekly and monthly meetings, committee meetings and board meetings, going to City Hall on a regular basis, or talking with the economic development officer and the various liaisons that we had to our association, and saying, look, if you do this, it will hurt the merchants. If you do this, it will help the merchants. And part of the problem there was none of the people on the council had never made a living out of a cash register. And I had to communicate viscerally what it was like to have to live out of a cash register, and that a policy that they were about to make could improve things 10% or, mess things up 10%. And that on a business with a small margin, 10% is huge. It can put a retail business in peril. 20% even worse. I was told, for example, by our merchants, if they were able to put a sign out, a chalkboard, hey, such and such is on sale, their business would go up. The city didn't want them to do that. We had to lobby for that. Some of this lobbying with the city took 3 years or 5 years. I mean, it was an extended process. Sometimes it took a turnover on that council or a turnover in the city manager's office to get somebody to hear what we were saying. But that was my job every day, to work for those merchants, to hear them, to understand what they wanted, and to represent that at the city government and with the adjacent neighborhoods. I built a lot of ties with the adjacent neighborhoods so that when we came in together, our organization with the neighborhood organizations, and said, this is what we want for Main Street, most of the time we got it done. Even with a couple of commissioners who would look at us disdainfully, like, how dare you ally with a neighborhood to do this? Don't you know that's not your territory? But it was our territory. They were our neighbors, and they wanted what was good for us, and we wanted what was good for them. And we made a lot of progress.
Very good. Okay, well, now's your opportunity to bring us on home with anything else you'd like to share or anything you'd like to amplify.
I would say, in closing, I'm the only candidate running that was elected citywide. Warden and Areola were never elected citywide. Ed's never been elected. I'm the only candidate running that's been a mayor, because even though it was a mayor commissioner title back then, it was essentially the same as the job now. And everybody understood that when they voted for someone for commission in 3 years' time, that person would become the mayor. So they knew they were electing the mayor eventually within that 3-year period. I'm the only one that has served as mayor dealing with the entire array of city issues. None of the other candidates can make any of those statements. Ed may or may not have done a good job on the utilities, and I think that's debatable, and we'll be debating that. But he's never served in a capacity of working for the people with an elected board where he can't tell people what to do as a director of a department. And he can't fire people as he did as director of a department in this office that he's running for. It's an entirely different mentality. It's an entirely different set of social and political skills. David and Harvey, they've never been a mayor. They've never had to deal on that broad scale. And I think the decisions they made, well, you know, I could be glib about it and say they speak for themselves. I know that I can do a better job. I know that I'm really good at listening, and I improved a lot over the years. You know, I'm a little bit older now, so I improved a lot at hearing what people have to say and then trying to work that into the solution rather than as a younger person having a strict idea of this is the way it ought to be, which I think we run into with some of the candidates that are running. So I'm offering myself to Gainesville as a candidate because I think I'd be the better choice.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Sure.
And we want to emphasize again at the Greater Gainesville Chamber that we are committed to making sure the voice is heard. So please do pay attention to our deadlines, get onto our website, and we'll have all the dates and all the information we're collecting about the candidates, and be sure to vote on Tuesday, August 23rd. Thanks again, Gary. Good luck in your campaign, and we'll see you out and about.
Thank you very much.